What's up, y'all, and welcome to Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast powered by Olde City Sports Network, the best network for all your Philadelphia sports needs and more. This is your host, Michael Roscoe. We got a good one for y'all this week. With the first preseason game out of the way, we got our first look at the Mannion offense, with the majority of the starters resting, though. And let's just say there's room for improvement. But before we break down our likes, dislikes, as well as our rising and falling player stocks, let's go ahead and talk some Eagles news. Starting off, we have a roster move to talk about. Following the preseason opener, the Birds add to the defense, signing cornerback Isaiah Bolden, a 2023 seventh-round draft pick who spent the first 2 years of his career in New England while spending last year on the 49ers practice squad. To make room for Bolden, the team waived offensive lineman Holland Pierce, an undrafted free agent out of Rutgers. In other news, there is a chance that Jonathan Grenard may miss week 1. So, defensive coordinator Vic Fangio was asked Wednesday about if newly acquired edge rusher Jonathan Grenard could possibly miss the beginning of the season, to which Fangio simply responded, "Yeah. We love a straight, simple, to the point answer, y'all." And as a reminder for those who may have forgotten, Grenard suffered a pec strain, not a sprain, a strain during weightlifting toward the beginning of camp. Now, original reports viewed this injury as not long-term worry. He'll be back by week 1. But as we're getting closer to the end of preseason, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Now, would it suck if he missed regular season time? Yes, I believe it would. However, this time around, we're not lacking at the edge position. We have Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith. And honestly, I would rather have them while Jonathan Grenard is healing for him to get to 100%, even if it means that he misses a game or two in the beginning, in order for him to be healthy for the majority of the season. And finally, before we get to our main topic of this week's episode, we have a former Eagle unretiring. And I think y'all might know where I'm going with this one. So, former Eagles edge rusher Za'Darius Smith. Well, technically, he's a defensive end, but whatever. Anyway, Za'Darius Smith, after playing with Philly for 1 long month before retiring in October of 2025, has decided that he's just going to unretire, just randomly out of the blue, and just signed this week with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, while he was with Philly, he managed to make 10 tackles and 1.5 sacks during his month-long stint. I think that was like 3 or 4 games worth. And of course, some people are speculating that Smith's retirement and subsequent unretirement was the result of him then leaving the Eagles and deciding, okay, I'm not going to be with the Eagles, so I'm going to go back into the league. But I feel like a lot of that shit is just for likes and clicks. When he retired the first time, he had stated that it was for personal reasons. And I'm not sure what motivated him to unretire, but nonetheless, he's with a different Birds team, not ours, so there's no reason to stress over it. All right, y'all, let's go into this week's main topic, which is the preseason opener versus the Ravens. We're going to talk about the good and the bad, as well as some rising and falling player stocks, from my personal opinion, from this season opener loss. And let's start with the good, because, why not? First thing I have is the whole offensive playbook was not utilized. And yes, I'm saying that is a good thing, because I did see a little bit more creativity. I wasn't wowed by it. I still think there was a lot of vanilla play calling going around. But later reports would indicate, including one from the Eagles Wire, that the whole offensive scheme wasn't utilized. And in a press conference, Mannion went on to discuss how he viewed this game, along with preseason football in general, as a time to, quote, make sure the players execute their assignments and play with good fundamentals. And now that is a mindset that I can get behind. You cannot expect a player to execute advanced or even intermediate players if they're unable to handle the basics. At that point, you would just be wasting their time. So I'm glad to see that, I would love to see some more creativity, but at the same time, I get Mannion's perspective. I think it's a smart, conservative approach to it as we get closer to week 1. All right, the next good thing I have about this is that our linebacker depth players were great. We saw Jahad Campbell play a little bit, but then we saw Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Smile Munden Jr., who would end up stealing the show, especially Trotter, as those two would combine for 10 total tackles, 2 quarterback hits, and a sack. These two showed that they can be reliable enough to step in and if an injury occurs and hold their own. And some might think they could be starter linebackers, at least Trotter, on another team. And I think that's possible, but I'm glad he's with the Eagles. All right. And my last good take from this game was that the first half defense, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. There's definitely room for improvement from the reserve defense. There were a lot of catches that the Ravens made over the middle, but for the most part, the defenders were able to either immediately tackle the receiver or keep the yards after catch to a significantly low amount. And, an end zone interception is always a plus. And additionally, they did their primary job for the most part, and that was to keep the Ravens out of the end zone as much as possible. They only allowed 1 score in the first half compared to 2 touchdowns and a field goal in the second half. And of course, there's things to clean up, but the second team defense showed a lot of potential, especially in that first half. If they can keep that level of consistency that they played in the first half, they're going to go into the next preseason games with a lot better results. All right, now let's look at the bad, because there was a lot of it. The first thing was penalties. And I know it was primarily backup players playing, and that can be a little bit different when you look at it from the starters. But regardless, avoiding penalties requires discipline. And there's no excuse whether you're the starting QB or the 4th string corner fighting for a roster spot to be as undisciplined as this team was on Saturday night. The Birds lost nearly 100 yards, a whole damn football field worth of penalties, which in a real game, that would be absolutely unacceptable. So, especially on the offensive line, you got to clean up the holding penalties, got to clean up penalties in general, because this shit cannot happen in a regular season game. All right, the next bad I have, and probably the biggest one, is the offense never found that spark until 2 minutes until the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. Because 159 total yards rushing and passing and 1 score in the last 2 minutes of the game is bad, even for preseason standards. The Eagles went 0 for 9 in converting on third downs. Our quarterback 2 and 3 competition was very stagnant. They looked like they were not playing to compete. Receivers were dropping the balls. And with the exception of a few decent plays, the run game was not the best at getting down the field. Of course, there wasn't Saquon on the field, so that's a big part of it. And while I do appreciate the Birds not diving too deep into the playbook in preseason, I would have loved for the play calling to not be as super vanilla as I think it was. But then again, when I looked at Mannion's perspective, it makes sense. The offense, it started off, low and kind of stayed low. Really kind of it plateaued a little bit until Cole Payton stepped in. And even then, there wasn't a significant rise in the overall offensive performance. I would have loved to see more creativity and more effort from the offensive players, especially when the majority of them are nowhere near roster locks and are supposed to be fighting for their jobs. That's not to say that none of them did, but there were definitely some who put in a lack of effort, and it showed. All right, let's dive into our player stocks rising and falling. We're starting with the rising. First player I have is center/guard Willie Lampkin. Now, he is one. Don't have to be the biggest guy on the field to make an impact. And it's pretty fucking obvious when he's standing next to Markel Bell, who's 6'9", that he is a smaller dude. He's 5'10", and he's seen as an undersized lineman. But Lampkin shed any doubt on whether he can have an impact on this offensive line, absolutely pancaking a Ravens defensive lineman. And apparently he pancaked a rookie during the Patriots joint practice, which we'll get into a little bit later on. Now, Lampkin took early reps in the game at both guard and center, which obviously shows off his versatility and his persistence, especially against guys noticeably bigger than him on that Ravens defensive front. often winning his battles, and he did not allow a single sack, quarterback hit, or even a single pressure in that entire game. And coming off missing a full year, Lampkin's already off to a fantastic start in proving that he deserves a roster spot on this team. Our next player stock that I believe is rising is none other than offensive tackle Markel Bell. Now, I have been hype about this guy ever since he was drafted, and his showing in his first NFL preseason game was pretty great. He did really well against the pass rush. He outsmarted the edge rusher on a play with Tank Bigsby running out to the right early in the game. He got a little jumbled up later on a different play with Bigsby, though. I would say that was probably one of very few, if not his only real mistake in this game. Bell has had a very successful camp, and it was great to see him not suffer like any kind of performance deficit or like stage fright by carrying the skills that he's had in practice over into a game. I love what this guy has done so far, and I have a very good feeling about him with this Eagles team. Our next player stock rising, I have quarterback Cole Payton, and I'm going to be honest. I originally didn't have high hopes for Payton going into this game after seeing how like underwhelming of a camp he's had up at that point. But boy, did he surprise me. Accounting for nearly half of the team's total yardage, including averaging 15 yards per carry running on the ground, Payton made up for his early camp mistakes within this game. He threw the team's only touchdown pass in the last quarter to Eric Ezukama, and Payton looked like the only Eagles quarterback putting any effort into this game. I would like to see more passing from him, but his quick decision-making and versatility on the field certainly caught my attention, as well as the attention of many others. While we didn't see him throw a lot, I think getting the ball, forward on his legs was still a great decision. I was pleasantly surprised by his performance, and I'm excited to see more of him against New England. All right, my last two, I should say, players who have rising stock after this game are the international pathway players of defensive tackle Uar Bernard and outside linebacker Joshua Wayru. Now, Bernard showed a promising performance even when getting double teamed on his first ever NFL rep and holding his own, while Wayru registered 2 quarterback hits in his first 3 snaps playing NFL football, which may seem small accomplishments. But again, for 2 guys who have never played any type of organized American football in their entire lives, these are bigger than they seem. Some analysts are already predicting that Bernard is going to make this roster. While I believe that's optimistic and not totally out of the picture, these guys still have a long way to go in their NFL careers. But this game was a great start for their preseason, and I believe they deserve some recognition for that hard work. All right, now the falling stock players. We have quarterback Andy Dalton, 3 for 6 passing for 20 yards and not recording a single rush is not ideal of someone who's potentially going to back up our QB1. It's just not. I can attribute some of the problem to the play calling, but still, it just didn't seem like he put as much as an effort as he could have. I think that's changed a little bit in the first joint practice, so hopefully that translates over into the preseason game. My next falling player stock is quarterback Tanner McKee. And for someone who's given us hope stepping in for both Jalen Hurts and Kenny Pickett and putting on a performance, including like 2 touchdown passes in his first 5 NFL passes ever, he did not flash that level of elite play in this game against the Ravens at all. I wasn't impressed by the lack of quickness in decision-making, which resulted in him getting sacked in one play and then a tackle for loss on another when he decided to go forward with a handoff to running back Will Shipley when there were already 2 defenders in the backfield, as opposed to faking the handoff and rolling out to the right, which I would have done personally. But anyway, it was one game, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, but I really do hope to see a better performance from him this Saturday. All right, and my last falling stock player I have is kind of a surprise. Some of y'all may agree, some of y'all may disagree, is wide receiver Darius Cooper. And I expected a lot more from him as well because of how well of a camp he's had. But in this game, he dropped the ball, literally. I was so surprised by the butterfingers I saw from him, which is very atypical. He's been making athletic as fuck catches, but in this game, it just seemed like he forgot about all of that. I'm hoping that he takes the opportunities during the rest of the joint practices and going into this preseason game against the Patriots to make up for that performance. All right, y'all, before we wrap things up, I do want to briefly talk about the first joint practice that happened today. And I'll wrap up this episode with the quick summary of it. And the first joint practice between the Eagles and the Patriots was, if I'm being real honest, it wasn't a great look for the Birds. Despite social media showing Quinyon Mitchell breaking up a pass in the end zone to A.J. Brown, Brown had a very successful practice catching all 6 of the previous passes before that pass breakup during 11 versus 11s. Plus, all of the quarterbacks struggled with plenty of interceptions being thrown. Our offensive line struggled under pressure from the New England defensive front. The secondary had their issues with receivers, including and not including A.J. Brown, including one play where it appeared to show Cooper DeJean getting burned in the secondary, ending with the receiver making a catch. Now, that could have been DeJean handing off responsibility to the safety per the defensive scheme, and then the safety failed to execute their assignment. But regardless, it wasn't a good look. Even special teams struggled, with Jake Elliott missing 2 of 5 field goals. And we already know, like, he was on, thin ice after his performances from last year. I got to imagine the coaches chewed this team out after this first practice. And if not, they absolutely need to, because I'll be honest, it seemed fucking terrible for a good portion of the day. But if I am going to be optimistic about this, there were good moments, such as Jalix Hunt having a fantastic day, Elijah Moore and Dontavian Wicks making great catches, including one where Wicks just absolutely fucking, beat the brakes off of the corner. And then the run game had a pretty decent day too. Of course, Pats fans want to flex on social media about how dominant the Pats were, especially A.J. Brown. And technically speaking, yeah, the Pats had a great practice. Emphasis on practice. We talking about practice? Anyway, it's just one practice, so the Birds have plenty of opportunities to improve and clean their mistakes. But come on, y'all. You can't let A.J. Brown flex on y'all in New England after all the drama he caused in Philly. I hope the team does a better job in this next practice and in game, or else there's going to be some major concerns for this team as we get closer to the regular season. All right, y'all. That is it for this week's episode. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow the show on YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok by searching at Second and 15 or by the full name Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast. And of course, don't forget to follow Olde City Sports Network. The handles have been playing at the bottom of the screen below for those who have been watching live on Facebook and YouTube. You can also find the audio for these shows, as well as Second and 15, each and every episode. Sorry, let me rephrase that. You can find the audio for Second and 15 for each and every single episode, releasing Thursday mornings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Player FM, or wherever you get your podcasts, with the video uploading to YouTube later that same day. And don't forget to check out the episode descriptions for promo codes and links from our sponsors for amazing products from Warlord Beard Oil, SeatGeek, Dubby Energy, and more. Check those out. We have plenty of promo codes, saves you some great discounts on some awesome products. Once again, thanks y'all for joining in. This is Second and 15, a Philadelphia Eagles fan podcast powered by Olde City Sports Network. We will see you all next week. Don't forget to stay fly like an eagle. And as always, go Birds.